All right, guys, welcome back to the Sex and Bacon podcast. On today's episode, I have with me Andrew Daniel, and we're going to have a amazing interview on a few different topics: sexual polarity, holistic sex, which I'm really excited to get into. But first, if you wouldn't mind, can you give everybody just a little bit of an introduction and a background about who you are and what it is you typically do?
Hi, Sarah. Yeah, thanks for having me. So, I'm Andrew Daniel, and I am an author of a book called Awaken to Your True Self: Why You're Still Stuck and How to Break Through. And I'm also the director at the Center for Cinesomatic Development, where we use video and movement to help people see the subconscious myths, stories, archetypes, and blocks that are running their life. And before I got into that stuff that I'm currently doing, my primary initial work was in personal development and holistic sexuality. So I published some stuff around the concepts of holistic sex about 10 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And so my really foundational work was in my own transformation of learning about dating and sexuality and relationships, and then that merged and evolved into healing because I realized, it takes a lot more than just knowing the right spots and the right words to, have a great relationship and have a great sex life. There's a lot of inner stuff and mental stuff and emotional stuff that is actually getting in the way. And so that eventually led me to the work that I do now.
So, do you find though, because I have lots of conversations and I do lots of interviews with women, it's not, I haven't had a lot of men that I've done interviews with talking about sexual healing or traumas or the inner work when it comes to having a great sex life. So, this is a very different conversation from the man's point of view,
Yeah.
which I think is partly why I'm really excited to have it, because I've never really been able to hear from a guy talk about the fact that those things are just as important for you guys as they are for us. Like when women talk about doing the inner work or healing traumas and sexual healing and things like that, most men kind of shut down or look at them like kind of like that's women stuff. So
Yeah.
for a man, I mean, this is something that obviously was important to you for your own personal, life and relationships. But do you find then even that you work with a lot of men who are actually kind of coming to you saying, hey, this is something that like I want to look into? Or are they not quite as vulnerable as, say, like what we want them to be?
Yeah, I think generally the people that come to work with me aren't usually your typical, yeah, guys or people, so to speak, because what I do is fairly advanced. We're really
Mm,
looking at our shadows. We're really looking at the stuff that we don't want to look at. So you said something really key is that a lot of guys will look at that and just shut down.
mm-hmm.
Well, that is a huge indicator. The fact that you'll shut down around something like that tells us that you're vastly out of relationship with all of that stuff. And yeah, so we could just get into all sorts of stuff, but to answer your question, generally people will come to me. I work with men and women, and oftentimes the thing that we work on isn't the thing that they think they're coming to work on, right? So guys will say, "I need help with women." All right, great. Well, we find out that right, there's this trauma, the relationship with their mother and their father come into play. We find that they have, let's say, been rejected by a lot of women.
Mm-hmm.
And so their relationship with the feminine is one of pain and hurt. And so we start to discover that there's a lot more than just these are the social dynamics. This is how you pleasure. This is how you seduce. This is how you talk to each other. And much more about a lot of men not willing to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is seen as a weakness
Mm-hmm.
rather than a prerequisite for intimacy. And once we start unpacking all of this stuff and they go through this process and they get results and they actually can feel and connect to women 100 times better than before. They're more open. Their heart is open. The sex is better. Once they start actually seeing the evidence that this isn't just wackadoodle shit, that this is actually having practical, applicable results, then they get it. But beforehand, it's they use most people don't really see that connection.
Yeah, because like I mean, most men that I know in their mind, it's like I get off, so I must be doing it right. And if I get off, then it's working.
Yeah.
And they don't really, not all of them are looking for that deeper, more emotional type of connection. Like it's like you said, it's men were told men don't cry. It's a weakness to talk about your feelings. And when you try to, be the woman that's asking, it's considered to be nagging when you're like, well, let's talk about this. Let's go deeper. Let's get to know each other on a more emotional level. Let's talk about your past. Let's talk about, childhood traumas and wounds and things. And, you know, like you said, men don't want to usually talk about those things. It's like, I dealt with it, leave it where it is. It's not affecting me. But like you said, when they
Yeah.
actually really start to work on it and then you notice
Yeah.
the results, and I mean, as a woman myself, I mean, sex has always been very important to me. But as you get older, I think you realize there is such a huge difference in going through the motions and actually being connected to the person that you're actually having sex with. And then when you start to have those sexual relationships that had connection and had conversation, and you could be vulnerable and you could talk about your past and you could talk about your traumas and you could talk about fears, like you said, like the sex is like next level type of
Yeah.
sex. Like you're connected in a different way. The orgasms are, 10 times better than say what they are on a very surface level. And once you've had that, you realize you don't really want anything other than that.
Yeah.
Right? But you want a woman wants a man who is emotionally capable of going that deep or willing to do the work. Right? So I do think it's amazing that you hold space for men in that way and help them do that. It'd be really great if all men could see this actually as a strength and not a weakness and were willing to, to go there, but it's scary, right? And I think
Yeah.
women are used to getting together in groups. We talk about our sex lives, we talk about parenting, we talk about everything. We cry together, we're vulnerable together. Men don't do that.
Correct. Yeah.
So they don't feel supported and not really encouraged to even start to look at those kind of things, right?
Yeah. Well, the a lot of this comes down to our relationship with the feminine. And I don't say the feminine in some sort of kooky new age way.
Hmm.
I literally mean these this archetypical just this archetypical energy of what is feminine. And we all have masculine and feminine within us, right? We all have left brain, we all have right brain. We all have linear logical thinking, and we all have creative, intuitive, sensual feeling, right?
Hmm.
We all have this inside of us. And in our Western culture, that has not only been shut down in women, as obviously seen throughout what happens to women throughout history,
Hmm.
but it also has happened to men. So that aspect of ourselves as men, that has also been downplayed. All of those qualities, the things that are soft and penetrable and open and surrendering, all of these terms for most guys are very uncomfortable. You
Hmm.
start saying be penetrable, right? Surrender, soften, open, vulnerable. They freak out. And that is the start. That is the start of being able to go into this stuff. Because if you're out of relationship with these things in yourself, how are you going to relate to that in your partner, in women?
Hmm.
And a man who can do that is about 1,000 times more valuable to a woman, let's say socially, than a man who can't, because they're that much more rare. Why? Because it takes tremendous courage, because it goes against all of the societal upbringing that we had. And it starts by dispelling some of the myths, right? Starting to dispel that surrender isn't a giving up or a giving in, right? It's a letting go, right? That's directly correlated to the masculine is hard, right?
Hmm.
Literally, phallically. And so what is the relationship with softening? Being penetrable, right? The masculine is the penetrating energy, and that's fantastic. But when you talked about having this deep connection while having sex. One of the things that I I help teach is this balance between penetrating and being penetrable, right? So as a man, you're going to physically, emotionally, mentally, with your whole being, penetrate your woman. And that is going to help her blossom, to open up. And in order to do that at the deepest levels, you have to be penetrable as well. Right?
Mhm.
She needs access to you. She needs to be able to feel you, to be able to feel your heart, your intentions, your connection, that you're willing to open up emotionally as you're physically penetrating her. So if you imagine, this is a really good visual. We all have seen the yin and yang symbol, right? The white and the black. But a lot of times people forget that there's a black dot in the white and a white dot in the black. And this is exactly what's happening. When you're giving, you're also receiving. When you're receiving, you're also giving. When you're penetrating, you must also be penetrable. When you're
Mhm.
penetrable, you also must be willing to penetrate. And so this is the foundation of real intimacy. And that requires vulnerability. We all want intimacy, but so many of us are terrified of the path of getting there because it requires being vulnerable. And this then plays into our past traumas, our boundaries, our self-esteem, maybe past abuse. All of these things start to come up, right? When I work with women, a lot of times they have shut off because of sexual abuse. Like I haven't had any female clients that has not had some sort of sexual, I don't want to say as far as abuse, but something that has
Mhm.
shut them down in a certain way throughout their life. And so, in order to open this up, it requires feeling safe, right? It the number one thing for a woman is safety, and it's not just physical; it's mental, it's emotional, it's spiritual. And if she can't feel her man, if she can't feel that you are present for her, it's
Mhm.
going to be hard for her to surrender, to open up, because she doesn't feel safe in order to do that for you. Well, what does that lead to? People listening to this be like, okay, this sounds
Mhm.
whatever, but what's the point? Well, as you said, the orgasms are astronomically better and more powerful when
Mhm.
you have that connection. The pleasure and the depth that occurs when a man is leading a woman into this blossoming, into this opening of great pleasure and of deep connection and presence, right? As a man, you're not only penetrating her physically, you're penetrating with that presence. You're
Mhm.
you're grounding her and opening her. So it's this yin and yang cycle. It's this kind of toroidal field where I'm speaking kind of esoteric terms here, but if you just think practically, it generates love, it generates pleasure, it generates connection
Mhm.
rather than takes. So much of our relationships and sex is based on this. Well, I got mine, right? I got
Mhm.
off. Well, she must like it. Usually not. And right, it's this I got mine and you get yours, and it's this taking. So it
Mhm.
looks like this, right? If you're seeing this on video, right, it's a taking from one side and a taking to the other. Eventually, there's nothing left to take.
Mhm.
Whereas if you're coming together, if you're giving, if you're opening, it's more giving. And so it's generative when both people are giving and receiving. So when I start showing people this, not only this theory, but I get them in their body, I get them to experience this for themselves and with their partner, just doing some non explicit, just movement exercises, you start to see all of these dynamics at play. And when you can start healing these dynamics, everything changes. Your entire relationship changes. I just got off a few days ago with a new client. It's our third call. He's getting a divorce. How many couples do you see? How many lives do you just of men and women that you
Mhm.
just see completely destroyed due to infidelity, due to a lack of connection, due to we're just things don't work. How many relationships end up with no sex? Like I talk to people and they're like,
Mhm.
yeah, we have sex maybe 2 or 3 times a year. I'm like, what?
Oh,
That
yeah.
that doesn't work. That does not lead. I've never seen a lasting relationship. Maybe they're not having sex, but that sexual energy is there. They're flirting, they're smiling. You can feel this energy going through, and being able to look at this stuff inside of ourselves that's getting in the way of that is really the best path to that.
It's so true, and it's crazy because in all the interviews and all the men and women that I talk to as well, I mean, sometimes even just friends or family members, and it's just like, yeah, we have sex. She usually gives me my weekly due. Keep me happy, kind of whatever. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
oh, like that sounds exciting.
Yeah.
So it's like once a week or every 2 weeks, you get you did a good job, husband. Kind of sure
Yeah.
you can give it to me, kind of whatever. And it's like and then that's all I think about is like how sad that you guys are lacking that intimacy and that connection where it's looked at as a wifely chore and a thank you for still paying my bills husband kind of
Yeah.
thing
Jesus. Yeah.
instead of like we get to connect to each other. And here's the thing is I think people forget that intimacy and sex isn't just about actually, sex. Like it doesn't have to just be, penis inside the vagina type of sex for it to still be considered intimacy and connecting and for it to be a sexual activity. There's so many other things that men and women can do to connect in that way that I think we forget about. And people think it looks like work or, well, then I got to make time for it. And it's like, well, you make time to sit on a couch and watch TV, or you make time to do all
Yeah.
these other things. Why can't that just be making time together to go lay in bed and talk? Build the intimacy and the connection from conversation. You might not be in the mood, maybe you're tired, but usually from intimate conversation, I find most men and women, it evolves into the physical intimacy and the physical desire to touch one another or to play together. But it starts with like that communication and that conversation piece first and the willingness to actually spend the time together, which seems to be really rare these days that anybody in a relationship wants to actually carve out real time to spend with their partner instead of it looking at it as something that like I have to do instead of like I get to stay home on my Friday night. We have 3 hours together, no kids, no commitments, no nothing else, and we actually just get to sit together, to touch each other, to ask each other questions, to all of these things. And like that's what you should be excited for. Those are the people you should be excited to spend your time with.
Yeah, I mean, you just brought up like so many things. Absolutely. It's really interesting because it's great hearing this because for so long that has not been my life, right? I've been doing this for about 15 years. So this whole journey for me has been going from that place and seeing that as normal to having a different kind of normal.
Hmm.
And I think a few things that you brought up. One, intimacy. When I teach intimacy, I almost don't even start talking with sex at all. Right? What if you read my book, if you see my work around intimacy, we're almost never talking about sex because most people have this association. Most people only let themselves have intimacy through sex. And so when you start talking to especially guys about intimacy, they don't know how to relate to it unless it's with a woman. I've had this experience myself is that when I started to have intimacy in my normal life, I'd be talking with a guy and I started to notice all of a sudden I would be looking at their lips wanting to kiss them and it freaked me the hell out. I'm like, what the hell is happening? Long story short, I eventually realized, oh, my entire life, my association with this feeling of intimacy and connection has
Hmm.
been with women kissing them. And so
Okay.
when I started to actually have that kind of just connection, platonic connection with men, that was my wiring. I literally was wired this way neurologically to have that association. So I moved through that and realized I'm not gay. I don't want to go around making out with men at all. But I noticed that I had the physical sexual stimulation uh, entangled with this feeling of intimacy. And so this is why a lot of guys, if you just like touch their shoulder, they freak out, right?
Mhm.
If Western guys have any physical touch by another man, they freak out because their only association with intimacy is sex with women. And so if a man is doing something similar, it triggers that same thing. You go over to Europe, they don't have any of this weird shit. I was in Italy. The men are touching men and it's normal. You kiss them on the cheek. It's not gay. Guess what? The Italian women I've talked to, I have sex with Italian man versus an American man. Very, very different, right? The Italian man, I'm generalizing here, but they're going to make love for 3 hours. Whereas an American man, it's about 5 minutes. And these are generalizations. I'm not capping on anybody here, but it's just showing that there is a certain correlation between the way we relate to these things within ourselves and our comfort with these in our own body and with our partners in the world.
Mhm.
And so if we can begin to let ourselves be vulnerable and have this intimacy in our daily life, we can start untangling this gay association. We can start untangling this fear. We can start untangling, oh, I'm just actually having intimacy with another person that isn't related to my penis. Right? And so I think one reason why women are more in relationship with this than men is because of what you said earlier. You do this with each other. You cry together. You talk to
Mhm.
each other. You hug each other. You spend time to each other. And in our Western modern culture, men are told they can't do that. They have to isolate and toughen up. Now, that works well if you're hunting, if
Mhm.
you're finding food, if you're at war, if you're fighting. So there's a lot of these strategies that we've just inherited from times when men crying while they're hunting or defending their village isn't going to work. That
Mhm.
is appropriate. You do need to toughen up and be able to get through that hour, that day, that week, that month. But what serves on the battlefield, and I've worked with veterans, what serves on the battlefield isn't serving your relationships. And this comes down to another fundamental distortion, myth, is that it's the battle of the sexes, right? Men versus women. Our culture is enamored with this approach of, well, men are like this and women are like this, and they're constantly at war. And I realized this years ago. I was like, wait a minute. Everything that we're doing is to get women, and everything women are doing is to acquire a man. And it's like everything is based on having the opposite sex love us and have this amazing love and relationship between us. Why are they the enemy?
Mhm.
Why are we at war with them? It's just this is going to work. You're
Yeah.
not going to trust the enemy. And so this leads to the next thing that you said about these relationships where they don't want to spend time with each other. There's so many relationships where people aren't actually in a relationship. They don't even like the other person. It's like
Mhm.
you don't even want to be around this person. This is codependent. You're just using each other, whether it's for sex or money or whatever. And so it becomes this transactional thing. Okay, here's my weekly. I'm a good boy, neutered husband,
Yeah.
right? Or whatever it is. And that's not a relationship. And people are missing out on so much fulfillment, so much depth, so much connection, so much pleasure. One of the first things I realized that creates that dynamic stems from men, right? So the man is inherently this masculine energy. The masculine energy is inherently a leading energy. It doesn't mean women can't lead, but energetically, the yang energy, the yang principle is this penetrative leading energy. And so when a man is with a woman, what I find always works, always works without fail, is when the man leads the woman into pleasure first. Every single time I've put my focus first on pleasuring my woman,
Mhm.
every single time I've done that, guess what happens? She wants to return the favor, right? She wants to pleasure me, not
Mhm.
as a tit for tat. Most people are caught in this tit for tat. You give me yours, you give me mine, I give me yours. It's a transaction. But
Mhm.
when you actually make her pleasure your pleasure, right? When your pleasure, when you're actually aroused, when you're fulfilled, when you see her orgasming, when you see her squirting, when you see her body convulsing, orgasm after orgasm, because of your touch, because of your love, because of you. Oh my God. As a man, I mean, it's just like the best
Mhm.
fucking feeling in the world. You feel like a king. She feels like a queen. Well, guess what a queen does to her king? Right? Exactly. And so when you build that dynamic up, which goes back to what I said earlier about the yin and yang, about the giving and receiving, when you lead her to her pleasure, right, she's going to want to surrender to you. She's going to want to open herself up to more and more and more of that. She's going to want to say, "Hey, the kids are at school. We have 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Let's go into the shower." Right? You are going to have a relationship where there's no lack of sex, there's no lack of orgasms and intimacy. Now contrast that with what you said. All right, here's our weekly transaction. All right, roll over. All right, 3 minutes. Let's get this done with. Right?
Mhm.
You know what that usually leads to? Infidelity, usually emotional infidelity. Right? I have people in my life that because this was not there, the woman sought somebody else, whether it was
Mhm.
emotionally. People don't realize that there's emotional infidelity because of
Oh,
that
for
connection.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
So
usually unintentional to start.
yeah.
That's the funny thing is it really I do find that it is usually very unintentional to start. But when you're lacking at home so much that even the smallest of recognition from another person outside
Uh-huh.
of your house feels so big because you feel emotionally starved at home, which then usually ends up to some sort of sexual starvation when you feel like you're not being, pleasured, seen, heard, your needs matter. And then and it is very unintentional sometimes in those ways where it's like all of a sudden somebody says something nice to you and you can't remember the last time your partner said that thing and created that feeling inside of you, and then you're drawn to it and it feels good and you're not searching it out, but you're lacking it, and so all of a sudden it becomes where your attention goes. And and I've seen it happen countless times. And so I do understand that there is sometimes that very unintentional piece where people do end up straying versus like the very intentional sometimes. But one thing I want to touch on that you said when you said about Western, like our Western America, North America views on sex and intimacy versus, say, in Europe, that is a huge thing where other cultures, like you said, intimacy and sex, making love isn't a fear. It's something that whether it's a casual partner, somebody that they've known a few weeks, they're dating, they take it as like a thing, like you said, like they actually are fully into this for 2 3 hours of pleasure and making love and making a woman feel seen. But yet here in Canada, North America, men seem to have a very, well, if I treat her like I love her, or if I kiss her more, or if I touch her nicer, she's going to think I love her. And they have this fear that intimacy and good sex is going to be mistaken for, she's going to think I love her and I don't want her to think that I love her. And so it's like I feel like they almost shut themselves down from sometimes being able to be a good lover because of this like deep fear of love. And I don't know if it's a fear that
Yeah.
they don't want to be loved in that way or where it comes from. But I've had a lot of guys that I've dated and a lot of guys friends say like, well, if we do that, that's like making love. And like that whole term, making love, for them is just this wall that goes up that if I fuck her in a way that is nice, or deep or this or that, it's going to be
Yeah.
confused. So, where do you think that comes from? Because I do want to hit on that because I know a lot of women in North America struggle with dating with those things.
Yeah, well, again, I think there's a lot here. The first few things that come to mind, in America, we are based really on a very puritanical religion, right? So the people that came over to start in America were very puritanical. So we have the prohibition, we have all of these things in our history that have demonized sex, right? We have medical practitioners from the early 1900s, 1800s, right? Literally, the vibrator came from trying to cure women of hysteria, which is kind of just being horny. And
Mhm.
like they were just so out of relationship with this, right? With the religion, the separation between these animalistic urges and the the ascended spiritual stuff. So we have already based in just our history this separation. And this is kind of the reason I came up with holistic sex and the sort of philosophy. The tagline was merging the dirty with the divine, right? Merging the sexuality with the spirituality, bringing these things that throughout our history and our cultures have been in opposition and showing actually these come together,
Mhm.
pun intended. And so I think that's one aspect. The other aspect is just men in general are emotionally shut down. We have a distortion of emotion and feeling in our culture. And so this is really important because a lot of men that would be listening to this or hearing about emotions and feelings, what oftentimes is the image of being emotional and feelings looks like a hysterical woman to men, right? They see a woman who's being hysterical, which is a not feeling. Now, again, let me reiterate I'm not talking and saying that women who are feeling or expressing emotion are all hysterical. What I'm saying is very specific kind of woman who is acting out her emotions, who is creating drama, who is being hysterical about something. That image gets translated to emotions and feelings for a lot of men. They don't want that. Nobody wants that because it's not real feeling. Now, a woman, in contrast, who is crying, who is actually deeply feeling, who is present to her emotions, who's not creating drama, but is actually in pain, who is actually in grief, who's actually feeling, that is beautiful. That is amazing. That is wonderful. That is what we're going for. But we don't have this distinction, right? I even have to say this because a lot of people, women will get defensive. Oh, he's a
Mhm.
man saying women are hysterical when they're feeling. No, but there are people, men and women, who don't feel, who act out the feeling, create drama, and it turns into hysterics. You'll see this. This is what you see in, right, Jersey Shore, Real Housewives, these
Mhm.
kind of reality TV shows. It's all hysterical. It's all drama. These people aren't really feeling. Now, contrast that with real feeling. Real feeling is when you actually go inside your body and you feel the pain, you feel the grief, you feel the shame, you feel the guilt, you feel the fear, you feel the sadness, and you also feel the love. You also feel the pleasure. You feel the connection. You feel the hope. You feel the trust. You feel the grace. You feel the generosity. You feel the gratitude. Now, what happens is because a lot of us, a lot of men, see all feeling and emotion like that hysterical image that's unrational, right? Again, men are more of this rational, logical, linear way. Of course, thinking and being rational and facts and figures and math and science is superior to a drama, disconnected, dissociated, hysterical action. Of
Mhm.
course it is. But it is not superior to real feeling because real feeling plugs us into the truth. It plugs us into our gut. It plugs us into our intuition. It plugs us into the intelligence of our body. And all women have experienced the intelligence of their body when in their head, they're with a man they think they like, but their body shut down. the body will not respond to this man in front of him, even though their head are like, he's hot, he has money,
Mhm.
he's saying the right words. How come I can't come? How come I'm not getting turned on? Right? There's an intelligence of the body that is picking up on subtle things that the mind doesn't. Now, compared to the intellect that's running software programs, that is vastly superior. And it also, what it does is it gets us out of our head and plugs us into life. So many men, so many of us really in our culture nowadays are in our head, right? We're walking around like this.
Mhm.
We're completely shut down from our feeling. We take Xanax, we take Ritalin, we take all these drugs, drink, cocaine, pot, whatever it is. We numb ourselves out to not feel. We have an epidemic of anxiety. Anxiety is not a special feeling. It's not a specific emotion. It's not a chemical deficiency. It's an avoidance of feeling. So we have an epidemic of people who are not feeling, who can't feel, who are terrified of feeling, who don't want to feel, who don't know how to feel.
Mhm.
And all of that is fueling exactly what you said. And so in the Western man, when he starts feeling these things in relationships, when he wants to connect physically, but he doesn't know how to connect emotionally, he's not ready to do that yet. He's afraid of the hysterics. He's afraid of the codependent woman. He's afraid she's going to be needy and desperate and clingy.
Mhm.
He's going to want to run away, right? They're afraid of committing. They're afraid of love. They don't know how to love without being in love. All of these things, I just said maybe about 20 different things. All of this stuff
Mhm.
contributes to what you said. It's a big topic, but that's at least a bowl of
I
some of the reasons.
love how you explained that, and I love how you said that they don't know how to love without being in love, because I feel like that just with everything that you said, like, that one thing just totally sums up so much for, like, what that really actually means, and like you said, like, your bodies know. You can convince yourself of something, you can sit there and try to tell yourself something,
Yeah.
but women I feel like women's bodies, and same with men, they have that
Yes.
intuition of knowing that this person is not for you. Your body's not reacting. And it's not even necessarily sometimes I feel like you said, okay, like, you just can't orgasm, you can't get there, you can't get out of your head. I find too that I feel like with women, because obviously we are more sensitive down there, I find like my body will know if somebody's not right for me, where it's like you have sex with them and then like right away it's like I'll get an infection or something. And I'm like,
Yeah.
she didn't like him. Yeah. And then it's that whole thought process of
Yeah.
like, but it's the same thing. It's like you're trying to convince yourself that this is somebody you should be with for whatever external reasons. Sometimes it's just purely because you want sex. But again, then that's where I feel like you really have to look at like, am I having sex with this person to fill a void, to try to heal something, or am I actually genuinely having sex with this person for other reasons? And I think typically, like you said, so many women have traumas and all of these stored emotions and things that have happened that people aren't processing, that most times I think if you're having sex in a very casual way on a regular basis, it's typically to fill a void of some sort, which is really you're just not dealing with the emotions that are inside because you're not going within, you're not processing, and you're not actually dealing with everything that needs to be dealt with, which is probably why then most of those women, when they do react to things, look hysterical because they're not actually dealing with the emotions that are actually there in the first place, and they're not regulating them and they're not processing them, and they're coming out in these dramatic ridiculous ways. And as a woman I can say that because I know that I've done that before, so I can agree with that. But yeah.
What you said about filling the void, what's the reason? A lot of this comes down to self-awareness.
Mhm.
A lot of this comes down to emotional maturity. We are not taught emotional maturity for men or women in our culture. Look at
Mhm.
look at our role models. Our role models are politicians and are people in our celebrities, right? Politicians,
Mhm.
celebrities, social media influencers, right? These three things, less than 1% are anything that when I have children, are no role models that I would want to give my children.
Mhm.
Compared to maybe about 70 years ago, you'd say maybe about 50% of them could be role models. The TV shows, the movies, those were people you wanted to aspire to. Those were people that taught values and ethics and morals and maturity and ways through movies how to deal with stuff,
Mhm.
even up into the 80s. But if you look nowadays, I mean, the people writing our movies now, I mean, they have it's abhorrent.
Uh,
The the just it's the ideologies and stuff that are coming through are victim. It's about being a victim. It's about being special. It's about all of very narcissistic, immature
Mhm.
things. And I think one of the reasons is because there's this phrase, um, hard times make for strong men make for good times makes for weak men make for hard times, right? There's this kind of whole cycle. And if you kind of look at it, the people that were making this stuff 50 years ago came out of wars, right? They came out of
Mhm.
the Great Depression. They came out with real life experience. What are the people writing this now coming out of? TikTok, MySpace, the most comfortable time in history. And we're very blessed. I'm not
Mhm.
knocking it. I mean, I would not want to go back to any of those other times. But there is something to say of the emotional maturity of the media and the role models that are being put out for our generation, younger generations, even older generations. I mean, I see people in their 50s. They're grown ass children.
Mhm.
If you look at how people dress, right? You see 50-year-old fathers dressing worse than their sons. There's just not a culture of self-respect, of respecting of others, of emotional maturity, of a willingness to look at these things. Now, on the flip side, the younger generations are actually much more willing to talk about mental health. They're much more willing to talk and explore about some of these things,
Mhm.
which is great. However, because of the lack of maturity, it tends to be very whiny. It tends to be very blamey, right? It's the
Mhm.
victim mentality. It's let's do social justice. It's everybody else's fault except mine kind of thing. Now, there are great injustices. However, when it comes to our own life and our own relationships, we're the only ones that can do anything about it. And so, understanding and having this self awareness of, oh, yeah, I am terrified of feeling love, full stop. Whether it's with
Mhm.
a woman or with myself or with my family, I can't hug my own father. I can't hug my own brother without tapping them really hard on the back and pushing
Mhm.
them away. There is something wrong. I very, very, very rarely say wrong, but that is dysfunctional. That doesn't work. I have not had a single man that I worked with that wishes he had less physical affection by his father. Not a single damn one. Right?
Mhm.
Men in our culture in the West are starving for physical touch, for genuine affection, not physical stimulation, not getting off, but to actually have men that they trust, that they can confide in, that they can hug, that they can embrace.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean being in a cuddle puddle party with a bunch of guys. It doesn't mean going to some esoteric tantric workshop. It doesn't mean weird. You don't have to. It's not about some of these images that a lot of
Mhm.
men get in their mind. Oh, ooh, we're doing a men's group. All these men are crying, and a lot of men's groups are great. Some of them not so much. But it doesn't have to be this effeminate way. There are genuine masculine ways that have intimacy and connection and touch and affection that men can do.
Mhm.
And so we don't have to effeminize men in order to do this. That is in fact the wrong way to go. We are actually in a culture where men are less men. Men are it's really bizarre. Men have been demonized for being men, and so they're being more like women. While women have been demonized for being women and are acting more like men. This doesn't work. I mean, we're getting I mean, if you look in the culture, there's some weird stuff that's happening. and it doesn't work.
Mhm.
It does not work. We can want it to work all we want, but when I have clients coming in and doing this, I see their energy. I see all of this happening. Everything's tangled. Everything's misaligned. They're in great suffering. They don't have that connection. Things aren't working. And so this doesn't mean that we ascribe to the masculine and feminine stereotypes.
Mhm.
Stereotypes aren't working. It's these archetypes. It's this pure yang energy. It's this pure yin energy. And when we can get into relationship with both of these in ourselves, we can be in relationship with the opposite sex and the same sex in others. So when we're comfortable with our own masculinity, when we're comfortable with our own femininity inside of ourselves as a man or woman, when we relate to other men or women or those things in ourselves, everything works so much better.
So what is it then? I'm like, I mean, I know we talk like sexual polarity itself. I mean, we've touched on so many things. I'm sure we've kind of gone over a lot of that. But just for anybody who is listening, the actual term, when you say sexual polarity, what exactly are you referring to? What does that term actually mean?
So we really take it back to the yin and yang.
Okay.
That is really the most archetypical way of seeing this. If you, a lot of people have issues with masculine and feminine words.
Hmm.
They're too triggering for them. I like it on purpose because it's supposed to be. Those triggers are going to tell you what needs healing, what you're out of
Right.
relationship with.
Yeah.
Like if I say, don't be offended, I'm going to say the word man. We have a serious fucking problem that you can't say
Hmm.
man or woman without people losing their goddamn shit. That is people out of relationship with these archetypes. Well, what are these archetypes? What is polarity, sexual polarity? Basically, if you look at biology, let's look at a man and woman. You have a penis and you have a vagina. This is as fundamental as we get here.
Hmm.
Yin and yang. Masculine is the yang, feminine is the yin. So the yin is receptive. It's a hole, right? It's an opening. The
Hmm.
masculine is penetrative, which is phallic. And so, right, the penis into the vagina. All right. So this is the most basic biological form of polarity. So polarity meaning the opposites, meaning one thing that has opposite dynamics. North Pole, South Pole. We look at the Earth. It's one Earth.
Hmm.
Magnetism, it's all the same, but one's one pole and one's the other pole. And because they're the opposite, they interact with each other. There's a dynamic. When you have two magnets, one's a positive side, one's a negative side. Both Each magnet has a positive and a negative, a yin and a yang. You turn the positive and then you turn the negative, and then they attract. You turn the positive and the positive, they repel. The negative and negative, they repel. A feminine woman with an effeminate man repel,
Hmm.
right? A masculine man and a masculine woman, they repel. A masculine man and a feminine woman attract. A feminine man and a masculine woman attract. Now, generally speaking, most people, their primary way of being in the world, naturally, like at least 99% of people, is masculine men, feminine woman. You look through
Hmm.
all history, look through all biology, that's just it. If you have a problem with that, take it up with whatever it is, God, evolution, I don't know. I didn't come up with this stuff. I'm just reporting the details, okay? Now, remember, the magnets, the yin and yang, they have both. And so this is to understand that men aren't just masculine, women aren't just feminine. We have both. And when it comes to sex, what tends to work the best is when those poles are further apart. In our daily life, it's the opposite. In
Hmm.
our daily life, when we can unite and use both our linear, logical, rational, and our intuitive, creative feeling, when we can manifest the masculine and feminine in ourselves, do something creative within the container of structure and rigor and discipline, right? When we can combine both of those in ourself, we are going to be incredibly functional in life. Now, when it comes to sex, When we do the opposite, when we create polarization between the masculine and feminine, it creates sparks, right? When you have the two magnets, you get them together, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's this explosive energy when they come together, right? Literally. So when either person, let's just stick with a man, when a man's incredibly masculine, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, let's talk about some traits. Some traits of yang, masculine, is dominant, leading. All right, let's just stick with that. Dominant and leading. Well, what's the opposite? Submissive and following.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's get past all of the triggers. Let's get past all of people's shit around those terms and
Mm-hmm.
just look at that. So when you have that dynamic and one is in one pole and the other is in the other pole, it creates a spark, right? So you have a dominant and a dominant. There's going to be a lot of friction. It's not going to work. When you both people are submissive, nothing's going to happen. When both people are following, it's what do you want to do, dear? I don't know. What do you want to do, dear? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want. Whatever you want. Both people are following. Both people are submissive. When both people are uh, dominant and leading, it's I want to do this. No, I want to do this. No, I want to do this. I want to do this. Let's do this. No, let's do this. Right? That doesn't work either. You
Mm-hmm.
need both. When one is one pole, the other is the other pole, you create this incredible sexual attraction. It builds, right? And so through the seduction, through the lovemaking, through the sex, each person is doing things more in that energy, right? The woman is doing more submissive things. She's following, she's saying, she's receptive, she's lying back, she's opening,
Mm-hmm.
she's inviting, right? She's doing all of this kind of energy. And then the man is doing this. He's coming for her. He's penetrating. He's leading. He's taking her by the hand and say, "Come here." He's grabbing her hair, right? He's doing these things, and both are doing it. Oh my god! I mean, ask
Mm-hmm.
any woman. She's gonna be like, "This sex was hot. Fuck yeah." Any man, yeah. So that creates incredible sexual energy. So that's kind of the theoretical and the practical way sexual polarity shows up in relationships, in sex.
I love that. And it's funny that you said, like, it's I know people get very offended over that whole the man telling me what to do, blah blah blah. Like they've all of a sudden looked at the dominant man, that masculine energy, as like no guy's going to tell me what I'm going to do. This is this. But it's like you said, there's the balance of it. Like a man should be able to lead his woman through life, through challenges, through all of these things in every way where there's that trust as a woman that you get to be the feminine person because you trust your partner to make the decisions that are good for your household, for children, for finances, for all of these things. And it then leads also to that sexual component is like if you trust your man in life to be able to lead and be dominant, yeah, okay, you could be an intelligent woman and we get that. But it just means you're not combative with him in the sense where you feel like you have to challenge
Yeah.
everything he's saying because you think your opinion is right or your way is right. It's being able to surrender and knowing that he has you and he can make those decisions and
Trust and
you're wanting
respect.
to surrender. Yeah. And once you carry that
Yeah.
forward, like you said, into the bedroom, it's so much more amazing. Like I get that there's women that like to be in
Yeah.
control and there's that whole balance of it and there's the give and take. And it's not saying that you can't have that and you can't do that, but it's just having that internal underlying root of knowing that he can lead and he gets to be dominant and that you can just surrender and trust and you don't have to worry about everything or anything and you don't have to challenge, you don't have to tell him this or tell him that. Like that,
Well, this is
yeah.
this is what you said about control. Well, every client I've worked with, why do they want control? Safety,
Mhm.
right? Control. You control because you don't feel safe to surrender, man or woman.
Yeah.
But we get these ideas in our head, right? We see these images. You say, people are not wanting these certain things, like, oh, the man being dominant. There's a difference between being dominant and domineering.
Mhm.
There's a lot of men out there that are domineering in and out of the bedroom. That doesn't work. That is not
Mhm.
healthy. That's a tyrant. That's abusive. That is not what we're saying. Being a tyrant is not being a leader. Those are two different things. And so we need to develop the emotional maturity and distinction, right? What's the distinction between a leader and a dictator and a tyrant? What's the difference between being dominant and domineering?
Mhm.
And and it's also a different context, right? So in the bedroom, I'll tell my woman, get on your knees. Outside of the bedroom, I would never say such a thing.
Mhm.
Now, the bedroom doesn't have to be in the bedroom, it's the sexual context. I
Yeah.
won't say, go make me fucking dinner. I would never say that. That's incredibly disrespectful. But I would say, go, do something sexually explicit in the
Mhm.
context of arousal, in that frame that she knows the reason I'm saying that is because I love her, because I know it's going to turn her on. And so it's respecting at a deeper, different level because it's all based on respect. Like you said, well, I would never surrender to my man. I have to be in control. Well, it's because you don't trust him or yourself.
Mhm.
And if it's yourself, you have some healing to do. If it's him,
Mhm.
you need to find a new man that you can trust. Or, well, yeah, usually because generally you're not going to be able to change your partner.
Mhm.
And so it comes down to that safety, that trust, that respect, that vulnerability. Control is the antithesis to vulnerability. Well,
Mhm.
what I said already, what does intimacy require? Vulnerability. And so when you are needing this control, you it stops the flow of intimacy. So yeah, there's I mean, we're just opening up a whole other can of worms
I
on
know,
this
I love
topic.
it. I absolutely love these conversations. And like I could honestly have them like for hours on end. I really do. I do want to like ask you though. So for men, because obviously I do think that there is like that fear of a man to be vulnerable, to go within, to do all this stuff. For the guys that are listening, they're probably thinking like, yeah, that sounds amazing and like, that could be kind of cool, but they're also probably thinking, but like fuck that. I don't want to talk about my fears, and fuck that. I don't want to talk about my childhood traumas and all these things. What are those some basic tools that you would maybe tell them or could give them for somebody who really didn't want to go that deep, but they're curious and they're maybe just looking for a couple little things or shifts that they can do in their relationship or for themselves to maybe even just start to open the door to be curious to see what that would look like for themselves?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I would start with listening. Yeah, I would start with listening. Find other men, your partner, other women, and this has to be sincere. If people are like, "Ah, fuck this," so I can't help you. If you don't want to help yourself, just stop. So for people that are sincere in this, start getting curious. Right? I'm not asking you to go in and do shadow work. I'm not saying go in and start looking at your deepest, darkest stuff. I'm not even saying look at yourself.
Mhm.
Get curious in other people. Ask your partner about their childhood. Ask them about some stuff. Start listening. Get curious about other people. Because what's going to happen is you're going to start listening to them and it's going to start bringing stuff up in you.
Mhm.
And then don't even have to do anything with it. Just be aware of it. Just tell the truth. Just be aware of it. Oh, all right. You're talking about how your father did this to you. I'm feeling anger. I'm feeling fear. Okay, that's it. You don't
Mhm.
have to go to a therapist, do anything weird. Just start listening to yourself, to other people. That's it. Get curious. What is there? Just be willing to look at this stuff. That's it. Very
Okay.
simple. You don't have to dive in. Just start listening. Start by listening to other people at first, and then start listening to yourself as what comes up for you as you're holding space, right? And it's going to be a great practice for this masculine energy to hold space. What's holding space? It basically means just being present enough to listen, to see, look at the person. Make eye contact and listen to them, get curious, and talk about these things for other people. And as you do that, you'll start to see, you'll
Mhm.
start to get into relationship with things that you've never really explored before. And
I love
guess
that.
what? And guess what? The people you're doing that to with for, they're going to love it. They're going to feel more connected to you. They're going to appreciate it for you. So you're going to be very generous with your time. And if you do that with your girlfriend, with your wife, they're going to feel really connected to you. And what did you say earlier, right? That connection usually also leads to physical. Now, don't
Yeah.
do it as a manipulation, right? You don't want to turn this into a process, a game, a manipulation, a technique. Just really sincerely want to know about some of this stuff in the
Mhm.
people's lives that you care about.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And like I like that you said like it's don't you can't be listening to this and just being a guy and being like, "Oh, so I could have better sex and get laid more if I just like listen." That's not the point of this. The point
Yeah.
is, really for that deep connection for yourselves because I think men are missing out. I think that women have been on these healing journeys for a very long time through so many different modalities that there are available to them now for sexual healing, past lives stuff, childhood stuff, and it's allowed them to connect to themselves in a different way where they're realizing that they want more out of relationships. They want more from their partner, which in turn gives them more sexually. And I think that there is men that are starting to kind of wake up to that, but not as quickly as what probably we want them to be. But
Well, yeah.
honestly, it's such a powerful, powerful thing to think about the relationships you could have and what it saves you in the long run. And I don't just mean relationship wise, but in the grand scheme of things, it allows you to be, as a man, a better parent, a better partner, better in work relationships, better in friend relationships. I can't tell you, and I mean, this could go so deep down another rabbit hole. Maybe we'll have to do a whole other conversation on it, but I cannot tell you how many guy friends that I have that have lost a buddy and they have just said, I just wish he would have talked to me. And, like he just shut down. And it's again that male fear of connecting with another male partner in a very open, vulnerable way. And so instead, men hold all of this stuff in. And that's a huge burden to carry as a man to think that you cannot express yourself and you cannot talk about your fears and your feelings and your emotions and your traumas. Like they are just as valid of what you went through as a man as to what women go through. And so like they should feel safe and to talk about it. And so I really do hope that it gets men curious enough where they realize that they are just as deserving to have those type of relationships as what women are.
And I think a big issue with that is the judgment,
Mhm.
right? We use the judgment to protect ourselves, right? There's a lot of this out of relationship with our sexuality. There's a lot of relationship out of relationship with feeling and emotion.
Mhm.
And I think the fear of being judged, the fear of, despite how wonderful it is that as a culture we're getting much more accepting of, let's say alternative sexual orientations, things like this. For a lot of men, there is still, this homophobia.
Mhm.
And it's not really often too much of other men, it's usually in ourselves, this fear of, oh my God, maybe I am. And
Mhm.
well, our dad and all of this stuff. So I think that the safety, men don't often consider themselves wanting safety, right? Generally, a lot of us men, we feel pretty safe physically, but not emotionally, not
Right.
mentally. And we never really talk about that. We never really think about that. And so you can start yourself in your friend circle, just say, "Hey, if you ever need to talk, if you ever need to not talk, if you just
Mhm.
need me to hang out, I'm here." That's it.
Yeah.
You don't need to you touch and fondle. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to go into anything. Just say, "I'm here for you if you need
Mhm.
anything."
Yeah. No, I love that.
That's
Andrew,
it.
thank you so much. Like, this has been such an amazing conversation, especially for the male perspective to see that, like, you as a man, that you're doing the work with men and women, but that it's something that you value and something that, you're there to help other people through. I think that is kind of nice to see a difference, because it's always women. It's always women doing this, women doing the work, women in these spaces. And so to see, a man doing it and that holds value and can hold space for other men, I think is really important. So for everybody listening, if you're curious and it has sparked something inside of you, I highly, highly recommend to reach out to Andrew, have a conversation. I'll put all of your information in the show notes. People will be able to get in touch with you, because that's all it starts with, is just a conversation. And it's such valuable information that people didn't have access to before that now they do. Why waste it? Do something with it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But
And yeah, so thank you very much for that. If people wanted to check that out, it's just andrewdaniel.org. I have a
okay.
book. We don't go into sexuality, but all these concepts are still in there. And one last thing is that this is not just about sex. When
Mm-hmm.
you start working on this stuff, I've made hundreds of thousands and will be making millions of more dollars from doing this inner work. My self love, my confidence,
Mm-hmm.
how I feel in my own body, astronomically higher than I was before. I had warts as a kid. I was bullied. I was teased. I had no friends. I was made fun of. I was suicidal. We didn't
Mm-hmm.
talk about any of that. But that's where I came from. I came from hating and loathing myself.
Mm.
And so, beyond just having great sex and great relationships, this improves every single area of your life. And not only for you, but for your children, your parents, your family, your partner, and your community. So
No,
it's worthwhile.
absolutely. It's so true. So do you have social media then? Like, are you on Instagram where people can search you out there, or is it just through your website?
Just my website. I do
Okay.
have a YouTube. That's just Andrew Daniel. I'll have more videos there, but I am enjoying being off of social media and writing books and working with my clients.
That's fair. Well, thank you very much. And thank you to everybody listening. Make sure you go check out his stuff, check out his book. And sorry, what's the name of the book again?
It is Awaken to Your True Self, Why You're Still Stuck and How to Break Through. It's pretty much anywhere you want to get it.
Perfect. I love that. I will actually probably read that or listen to it on
Great.
audiobooks. I
Yep.
love that stuff. So, yeah, thank you very much for being on here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sarah.